I feel like the Jeopardy song should be playing in the background right now. I feel like the Jeopardy song should be playing in the background. All right, I hereby call to order the January 7th Town of Frisco Planning Commission meeting. Cheryl, will you please take roll?
Commissioner Franken,
Here.
Commissioner Gleason, Commissioner Gleason.
Here.
Commissioner Lesmes,
Here.
Commissioner Scupian,
Here.
Commissioner Stabile,
Here.
Commissioner Tane,
Here.
Commissioner Withrow.
Here.
Thank you.
Here. All right, thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl emailed out the November 5th meeting minutes. Are there any comments or corrections?
I'm hearing somebody rebroadcast. Has somebody got YouTube on?
Yeah, I'm hearing the same as well. If everybody wouldn't mind muting when they're not speaking so we can eliminate some of the feedback. Sounds good.
I moved the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Aye.
All right, now we're going to open the public comment section of the meeting. If there are any members of the public that would like to speak to any items that are not on tonight's agenda, now is your opportunity. Please feel free to either unmute yourself and speak up, or if you would like to utilize the chat section. I'm seeing no public comment.
So really quick, sorry to interrupt you, Kelsey. With this system, we don't have the chat system.
Oh, I
what
was
we
wondering where
do
it
is
was.
people could raise their hand if they have a comment that they want to make.
Okay.
So we're going to kind of view for hands being raised on the video images on this through the Zoom app. But I don't see any, so you're good to keep
I'm
going.
not as well. So we will close the public comment section of this meeting and move on to our first agenda item, which is the adoption of the Planning Commission Resolution 21-01. Is there, what do I do for this?
I move it.
Do we have a second?
Bill's unmuting and he'll give you a little spiel here. Give us 1 second.
This is just a housekeeping item that we do every year just to present to the public where we put our public notices, and these are our historic locations of posting notices. So we recommend approval. Thank you.
Good job.
Robert looks like he made a motion to approve. Is there a second? Donna seconds that motion. All in favor? Or do we take a
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Yeah, I'm about to hop in on a planning commission meeting started at 5. I'm trying to pull the Zoom.
Kelsey, you're muted.
You're muted.
It says I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so planning item number 2, file number 116-20-MAJ, a public hearing on a major site plan application for a proposed multifamily townhome project located at 116 Galena Street, lots 20 through 21, block 2, King Solomon subdivision 1, applicant Abby Plain, Plain House representing MACATR LLC. Katie, would you like to present?
Yes, thank you. So give me 1 second here. Sorry, hold on. Okay. So as you saw in the staff report, proposed is 3 units. They're on one property that is currently vacant. In the fall, the existing structures had been demolished. The Planning Commission reviewed this sketch plan in August 20th, 2020. The Planning Commission had given some feedback during that sketch plan review, and I'm sure you saw that it was outlined in the applicant's narrative and also incorporated throughout the staff report, so you could see how they addressed your sketch plan comments. So I'm just going to go through and review a little bit of the highlights from the staff report, and then as always, please feel free to ask me any questions. The plan, relevant sections of the community plan were referenced within the staff report. That includes the inclusive community and also the thriving economy. The central core is completely complied with as far as the dimensional requirements and other requirements within the central core district. That includes the setbacks, the 3rd floor step back, the height, and the density. Additionally, for this property, there is no maximum lot coverage, and so that is not taken into account with this proposal. The other thing to mention is that, as you saw in the staff report, and this is a new standard that we are applying to all properties that have existing lot lines through them, we did suggest a proposed condition of approval that the applicant is required to formally consolidate lots 20 and 21 block 2, either by vacating the lot lines or through a townhome plat. So that's more just a cleanup item that planning staff would like to start requesting to help so that we don't have townhomes and other developments that have old lot lines running through them that were never vacated. So that was included in your staff report. All of the development standards are outlined in the staff report. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. I did want to note a couple of them. There wasn't a lot written about the drainage plan, the drainage report, but I wanted to mention that they were gone through extensively between the town engineer, the public works, and the applicants. So multiple revisions were brought forward, reviewed, edited, etc. So as of now, the plans have received all town engineer and public works approval. I just kind of wanted you to know that even though that was abbreviated very simply in the staff report, there was a lot of work put into reviewing the drainage for the project. The applicant is going to be required to apply for a right-of-way permit from the Public Works Department prior to utility work, which is a standard for working within the adjacent alley and street right-of-way. That is kind of covered through our general condition, that the proposed condition that the Planning Commission impose a condition that the applicant shall satisfy all the requirements by Public Works that have been outlined in their memos and in the staff report. So by that condition, that takes into account that right-of-way permit that will be required during construction. Also, a waiver would be required from Public Works to have access off of the alley. That is the standard in streets, the street requirements through Chapter 155 that Public Works oversees. They do ensure that if any access off of an alley is proposed, it receives a waiver from them. They have given their support for that. So it shouldn't be a problem. Just to kind of review the proposal a little bit, one access is proposed, or one driveway is proposed off of Grant Galena Street Alley, which would access 1 unit, and then another access off of Galena Street, and that driveway would access 2 units. The traffic study was not actually needed, but the applicant went ahead and submitted one for us, which was in compliance by the Public Works and engineer after they reviewed it. The snow storage and snow shedding complies. You also probably saw in the staff report in the applicant's narrative that they did address the Planning Commission concerns at the sketch plan of how they were concerned about snow buildup on the roof decks. One of the topics at sketch plan was about the dumpster. Staff had put in their staff report, we'd like the applicant to consider a dumpster, even though not required, and the Planning Commission had kind of echoed that thought also. The applicant did put in their narrative why that's not really feasible with the proposed development. Staff wanted to note they are not required to have a dumpster. They are proposing individual toters, and they have submitted a letter from Timberline stating that they have no problem with the proposed residential container pickup. So again, the applicant did address the Planning Commission and staff's concerns about the dumpster and why they felt that really could not be provided on this site. There are no bulk plane encroachments, which is great, and I think the planning commissioners will appreciate that the architect had this project work without any encroachments to be looked at this time. The residential development guidelines have all been also complied with. That includes facade standards, roof materials, building materials, colors, and also the garage standards. Parking, 12 spaces are required. They are tandem parking spaces involved, so we do need the Planning Commission to find that the layout of the tandem parking is functional and that a minimum of 2 out of the 4 criteria in the code are met. As noted in the staff report, the applicant and staff believe that all 4 of the 4 criteria are met, but that is a specific finding suggested in the staff report. A newer one that you're going to start seeing all the time that we did evaluate with this application is the EV charging stations. Since this will be reviewed with building permits now through the newly adopted sustainable code, we wanted to make sure that the applicant was preparing for that. So they did reference for us that they are meeting the required EV ready space and EV capable spaces. And they've already planned for those requirements, and the electrical, it was going to be located on the side of the mechanical rooms on each unit. So no concerns there, even though it's really not under our review right now. We just wanted to make sure the applicants were thinking about it before they got to building permit time so that it didn't change the design that you're reviewing right now. Landscaping and lighting are also complied with. And that's pretty much the summary of the basic of the staff report. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Based upon the findings that we suggested, along with the proposed conditions, staff does recommend approval of the item.
Thank you, Katie. We're going to open it up to questions for staff. Why don't we start with you, Andy?
I don't have any questions for you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick, any questions for staff?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Lena?
No questions. Thank you.
Donna?
I just have one question. And I think maybe it was in the code, but when the code was updated, it might have been taken out. There used to be something with parking spaces. So there's a parking space per bedroom, and that they had to be able to park outside the garage. Something about it was I don't know, in case of fire or something like that. I'm from what I can remember. But so even though there's 3 cars in the garage, they would have to be able to park outside. And maybe Bill, knows all, all the details on that. But it used to be in the code, and maybe it's not because it's multifamily, but I was just sort of curious about that, because the driveway situation of having the tandem parking and it being tapered, it's going to be difficult to maneuver getting in and out. But then if this is part of the code still, then it doesn't meet it.
Mm-hmm. The closest I can think of that you're referring to is the criteria for the tandem parking spaces, but that doesn't necessarily say that you have to have an outdoor space. But I'll see if I saw Bill clicked on, so let's see if he has any insight on the history of that.
I would say I'm not aware of that requirement to have to provide outdoor parking.
Great. Any other questions, Donna? Ira, any questions for staff?
Come on. I looked at the color board, the selection board. There are 2 pieces of wood. One is kind of stained gray and one is stained brown. Are those interchangeable? They're going to be used in different applications?
One's vertical and one's horizontal.
Yes, and Abby, when we get to your presentation, I can hold up the board. Both of the pieces of wood fell off, so we don't have the labeling of which one is which. So I will let Ira, that's a great question, and I just realized that as I turned around and looked at the board. So I can't tell you which one is which, so I will have Abby assist with that during her presentation. Thank you.
All right. Robert, any questions for staff?
Yeah, I had 2 questions, and they're not really on the project. They're back to the to the community, Frisco Community Plan, and you've highlighted two things, and I have questions about those. One is under 11C, strive to create an appropriate balance of full-time residents, second home, short-term rentals. I noted in one of the town council meetings that we've adopted a standard where we're trying to increase the percentage of permanent residents in town, if I'm correct in what I saw. Since my understanding is from the last time that we looked at this project that these are likely to be second homeowners or short-term rentals or something other. How are we going to, in the long term, have to deal with this question of short-term versus permanent residents versus long-term rental or second homeowners?
I would answer that by saying that as of right now, we can't necessarily distinguish it unless it was a property that was using bonus density or similars that are required by our town code. That doesn't mean that in the future we won't have conversations about potentially changing the code to have more requirements for workforce housing. And then there's also another side, I'll let Don or Bill speak to this. And it could be a different conversation at another meeting about specific workforce housing projects that the town is actively pursuing right now.
And I just sort of highlighted it, and I just wanted to make sure I had read something correctly about what town council had taken as an initiative. The second one comes in, and this one is more of a curiosity question for me. Under 14B, you highlighted that they're meeting the standard of encourage infill and redevelopment that complements the character, scale, and massing of historic structures. How does a 40-foot, 40-foot building with 3 buildings on a lot comply with character, scale, and massing of historic structures? Did we used to have 40-foot buildings in town?
That's a really great question, Robert, and that may be a mistake that I shouldn't have highlighted that staff probably as you read it right now. Good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have no questions for staff. So at this time, we'll open up the floor to the applicant. I'm going to welcome Abby Plain. Take it away.
Okay. Hey guys, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Katie, I'm sorry. I had to switch off on my computer and onto my phone because it was breaking up a bit. So if I need to reference anything, I can hold it up or point to it if needed. But thank you guys very much for the sketch plan review and all your comments. I went through all of them and really tried to consider every single point that you guys made. I can go through them really quick. But first I want to address Ira's question with the wood samples. There's a horizontal color for the horizontal boards, but then I think what you're referring to is the 2 slightly different colored wood samples. Those are it's a reclaimed boards basically, and they just vary in colors. So that's just kind of, I think, giving you I'm just trying to give you the scale of color that you'll see in the boards there. And I can readdress that again if need to. But going through you guys' comments, just so I can make sure I hit on all of them. The first comment I have here, I'm just going through my response comments I sent in to Katie, but think about bringing the Galena Street facing facade forward to match the neighboring properties. So we went back and we went back and adjusted that front facade, and we were able to pull it up 9 feet towards the Galena Street, which then helped that setback that you guys were concerned about. We were limited with the outdoor parking space requirements. So we pulled it up as far as we could until we were till we were stopped with the planning requirements for the outdoor parking space. So we also included a 3D rendering of that street that you guys were concerned about seeing like how everything kind of blended and how it related to the two different projects on either side. They're kind of, you know, max versus min. And I really think that it gives it a nice balance. It's basically, you know, kind of feels like right there in the middle of the two. So I feel like that was able to be accomplished really well. As far as putting the shared dumpster instead of the individual toters, we really looked at this, the snow storage requirements and then the new transformer requirements that we're required to have on the site. It took up all of our space to have a full dumpster. So what the owner is going to do is put in the HOA documents that Waste Management has a service where they can come in and you grant access to them to come into your garage and get the toters, empty them, put them back. And so I know that might help that concern about having renters or short-term renters not emptying the garbage and then it piling up. This would then allow the Waste Management to come in, take care of that, so we're not worried about trash piling up or not getting taken out. Where's the snow going from the roof decks? Heat tape is going to be heat tape's always put in with this this type of construction, but heat tape will be put into the gutters to help with that damming and then help melt that roof deck snow. But then also we went in and allocated I took the same snow storage requirements that the paved spaces need, and I used that to calculate the snow storage for shoveling snow off of the roof and where it's going. And so you can see that on the site plan. And so every roof deck has an allocated spot to where they can, you know, adequately shovel the snow if needed. And then there was a question about the car circulation. We added a couple more diagrams on that on the site plan. Like to see an updated survey and a drainage plan. The owner went back and we got an updated survey. So it's new with the existing new existing drainage with the development to the east. So that has all been updated and incorporating the drainage plan and all the civil drawings as well. So so drainage plan, show drainage between properties. Can you lower there was a question about lowering the first level plate to make the building shorter. I went in and looked at this. Unfortunately, what we're limited with is having an 8-foot garage door, which is needed with the mountain cars. We're limited with that plate height. And so we couldn't lower it anymore. But luckily we're still within the height requirements and the bulk plane requirements. So hopefully that's not a big concern. Can you reverse the location of the units to 2 units off the alley and 1 off the front? And I really did look at this. I started sketching off some other ideas and seeing if we could flip it, seeing what other options there are. But, you know, trying to weigh all the factors of the, you know, resale cost, the views, the layouts, the sales cost, the proximity to the neighboring units, because we took in the initial design, we took into consideration where all the individual units, roof decks are on the existing units next doors. So trying to keep privacy for everybody involved. So it just didn't work out that way. But I think what we have is the correct unit layout that needs to be for that spot. Taking in consideration the neighboring properties and where their windows are and where their roof decks are, and trying to, you know, give them their privacy as well. Then there was a question about the textures. That there was too many textures and that the neighboring property, it was too close to the neighboring property. And what was what was happening there was that the property to the west, that is from the same developer. We were wanting to kind of coordinate the two, so they looked that so they were able to bounce off of each other a little bit. I took your comments into consideration. I lowered the amount of materials and tried to unbusy it a little bit, and then we also kept some same massing cues from the smaller development to the west, but tried to individualize it and make it its own property while also complementing the existing property to the west. So I think those were all the questions. If not, please let me know and I'll answer anything you guys need to.
Thank you, Abby. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. We'll open up questions from commissioners to Abby. Andy, let's start with you.
Hi, Abby. Thanks for your work on this. I had a quick question. You mentioned that you're heat taping the gutters for those rooftop decks. Is that just the gutters? Will you be snow melting the decks as well?
No, that's just in the gutters, just along the edge there.
Just in the gutter.
Yeah, to stop with that damming.
And
And that will help with the snow melt as well.
So the individual owners will still be responsible for shoveling those decks and keeping them clear of snow.
Yeah, and that's why I added this note where, the snow storage location for where they can shovel and drop without having it go onto other properties or using up the other snow storage areas. So.
Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Patrick, any questions for the applicant?
No, I mean, I think that there's been some nice progress since the last one, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lena?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I have a few questions. So from what I could tell from the plans, you said the building moved towards Galena 9 feet?
We pulled it forward 9 feet.
So, because right now it seems like you're right at the setback line where the building, the 20-foot setback, that's where the building gets to or starts.
There's a parking space. Yes, we have to take into consideration that 20-foot setback, but then also what's the real the real factor that we're stuck against is that outdoor parking space, which is keeping that 19 feet.
Okay, is that
from the
required?
garage door. Yeah, they have to be parked in the setback. Yeah.
I mean, I really like it. I just couldn't remember what it looked like before with it being almost 30 feet from the property line versus now 20. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And for the record, I guess, because it's on the plans, but I think that it says one of the units is a bonus unit. That's how the plans are labeled. And I just want for the record for somebody to clarify that that's not a thing, right?
No,
Correct.
I don't.
No bonus units.
There's
Oh,
no,
yeah.
it is how your plans
Is it?
label it. Yeah. If you look at one of the pages, like page, what page am I on? A2, it says unit 1 bonus unit, unit 2 market unit, unit 3 market unit. So.
Oh, that's an error on my part.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll update that.
No problem. All market rate units. I was just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
And those are my only questions.
Thank you.
Donna, any questions?
No questions.
Great. Ira, any questions for the applicant?
Just on that heat tape, when you say in the gutters, is there also some at the exit of the downspout?
At the exit of the downspout?
Where the water will be on the gutters and then it'll come down the side of the building. And then when it comes out by the ground, does that also have a defrosting element there?
I don't think so. I think it's just for the, minimizing that load on the gutters at the top.
Okay.
And then kind of helping with that melt initially at the top. But I understand where your question's going. I mean, I can certainly look into it. I haven't seen anything like that, but might not be, has to go through both gutters and downspouts. Yeah. So it has to be, so I have a note here that has to go through all the gutters and the downspouts. So that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Robert, any questions?
Only one question. You know, assuming these are second homeowners, and assuming we get a 3-foot snowfall, which we do occasionally, this year it doesn't look like it's happening, but and they don't shovel that deck, is there a risk to any of the building for the weight of that on the building?
No, that's factored in. The snowfall is factored in the engineering. So as far as load is concerned, that's already factored in the engineering part. You know, if I don't know where, I'm trying to think of another situation where it might be a concern. I don't see another, unless you guys have a specific case, I don't see another reason, but yeah, the engineer factors that all in.
Okay. No other questions?
Thank you, Robert. I have no questions myself. So at this time, we will open up the floor to public comment on this application. Please follow a couple rules. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you and state your name and address and keep it to 3 minutes. If there is any public comment, please voice it now.
And Kelsey, I just want to note that there was one public comment received and included in the Planning Commission staff report. That was by Nancy Kinney, and it was dated December 30th. I don't see her name on here, so doesn't look like you're going to hear from her tonight, but she did submit written comments for the Planning Commission review that you already received. I do see that we have one hand already raised from Lori Story, and I apologize if I said your name incorrectly.
Right, Lori, if you want to mute yourself and state your name for the record and address.
Hi, this is Lori Sturry. I own the unit at 190 Galena Street, number 6. So I am the unit that is immediately to the east on Galena Street of this unit. I'm also president of our HOA. The only comment I wanted to make was around trash. We have had a lot of stress in our development about trash. We just recently got a dumpster location, a dumpster approved. But in the meantime, we've had to use totes. And the tote situation isn't really good because it creates a rodent situation inside the garages when people keep their trash inside the garage. I understand the Timberline is going to be taking the trash out, but I'm just saying that we have found that situation to not be very satisfactory while we're waiting for our dumpster. It's certainly possible that we might be able to share our dumpster with this development. I think there's access to it. It'll be on the Galena Alley side. But I just want to, the feedback I want to give to the developer is you really need to have, if you're not I think not having a dumpster is not a good thing. And I don't think your owners are going to be very happy about not having a place outside of their garages to keep their trash.
Thank you for that comment, Lori. Are there any other comments from the public? Are you seeing any, Katie? I'm seeing none.
I am not seeing any. And if somebody is having trouble raising their hand through the participant list, you can feel free to turn on your video and just kind of physically grab our attention. But maybe Kelsey, give it 20 more seconds for that, but I don't see any others.
All right, I'm seeing none, so we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item and open it up to commissioner comments. Andy, anything you'd like to comment?
No, really just want to say thanks, Abby. I think you've done a nice job of taking care of our comments. Even a few I noticed that that you didn't necessarily bring up, railings and things like that that you've addressed, and I think it's a good looking project. I don't have any issues with it at this point.
Thank you.
Patrick,
I have no comments. Thank you very much.
Lena,
Yeah, I just want to say pretty much the same thing. Thank you, Abby, for really listening to our comments and making the changes that you've made. That's really awesome to see. So really appreciate the effort, and I have zero issues with this project. So,
Donna,
I echo Lena. So good. I'm glad that you listened to us. It was very refreshing, and thank you for your problem solving.
Absolutely.
Ira,
Looks good to me. It looks like they got a excavation machine parked out there like they are ready to go. So good luck and a happy building.
Thank you.
Robert,
No comments.
thank you. I'd like to echo everyone's statements. Abby, thank you for all your hard work and concern about protecting a very historic, important street in our town. And I'm confident that going forward, that the builder and the developer will, further enhance that and provide more housing. So we wish you the best of luck. And
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all your feedback and excited to see this thing built.
We are too.
Have a good one, guys.
So you need a motion still in a
Oh,
vote.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Kelsey, I'd like to make a motion.
Andy, bring it away.
With respect to file number 116-20-MAJ, I move that the recommended findings set forth in the January 7th, 2021 staff report be made, and that the recommended conditions set forth therein be taken, and that the Planning Commission hereby approves the request for the major site plan application for the proposed new multifamily townhome project located at 116 Galena Street, lots 20 and 21, block 2, King Solomon subdivision number 1.
Second.
Cheryl, would you like to take a vote?
Commissioner Scorpion,
Yes.
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesmes,
yes,
Commissioner Franken,
Yes.
Commissioner Tane,
Yes,
Commissioner Withrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay.
Great. We'll move along to agenda item number 3, planning file number RZ-20-0182, a preliminary public hearing on a rezoning application to change the zoning classification for the property located at 18 and 68 School Road, Lot 1, St. Anthony Summit Medical Campus from Light Industrial District to Mixed Use District. Applicant Traditional Neighborhood Developers LLC, representing Centura Health. And who we got on that? Bill, take it away.
Good evening, commissioners. Good to see everybody again. So what we have before us is a rezoning application. We don't get a lot of these, but they do come up from time to time. I think the last few you've seen have been more related to historic overlay district rezonings, but this one is a true traditional rezoning. The applicant is Centura Health, and they're working with traditional neighborhood developers. And their ultimate goal that they've communicated to us is at the current medical office building site, which is at that southeast corner of Summit Boulevard and School Road. They would like to demolish the old blue roofed medical office building and construct residential development on that property, including workforce housing. So a couple procedural things with a rezoning application. These are a little different than some site plans. So with a rezoning application, the Planning Commission actually has 2 hearings, not just one. So tonight is your preliminary public hearing, and we have tentatively scheduled the final public hearing at your next meeting. The Planning Commission's role, ultimately, is to make a recommendation to the Town Council. The Town Council will either approve or deny the rezoning request through the reading of an ordinance. So specifically for tonight, the code dictates that the Planning Commission is to hear comments and objections, request additional information, and/or make preliminary recommendations. So that's kind of the scope of what we're looking at tonight. As I mentioned, the applicant is kind of their long-term vision, would like to construct some new residential development on this property, including workforce housing. However, there is a provision of the town code that explicitly prohibits the Planning Commission from reviewing a site plan application concurrently with the rezoning. In fact, the applicant is barred from even submitting such an application. So tonight we're only looking at the rezoning. We're not looking at any future development project they may have. That would be down the road if the rezoning goes through. So this is step one in kind of a two-step process for the applicants. So another thing to kind of keep in mind with this rezoning request is although the applicant has communicated that their intent is to build workforce housing, this rezoning application still needs to stand on its own merits based on the criteria for rezoning. So those are highlighted in your staff report. So I just want to highlight a couple things. We did pull out some provisions of the community plan. Those are highlighted in your staff report, as well as the applicability, area required, and zoning criteria. So under applicability in the code, rezoning requests can be initiated by the town council, the planning commission, or a property owner. So in this case, we do have Centura as the applicant, so they are the property owner, so they meet that criteria. There's another criteria for area required. So within the town of Frisco, the property in question for the rezoning must be a minimum of 1 acre. Or if it's smaller than an acre, it has to be rezoned to a district adjacent to that property. This property is 3.8 acres in size. So it clearly meets that threshold of 1 acre and is eligible for a rezoning application. In your staff report on page 6 is where we started kind of breaking out the rezoning criteria. There are 4 of those outlined in the code. The application must meet 1 of those criteria for the town council to ultimately approve this request. So I do want to highlight number 1 and number 4 real quick because staff does not believe those are applicable. Criteria number 1 is related to zoning errors or technical or corrective actions. Those do come up from time to time. This is not one of those cases. And then also criteria 4 is more directed towards new projects or new types of uses that weren't anticipated by the code. I would say that residential development has been anticipated by the town code for decades. So this is not a new type of use. And so criteria number 4 doesn't apply either. So criteria 2 is one that's probably the most relevant. That one addresses how things have changed or changing conditions in an area of town and in the town generally. And then if the rezoning is of public interest for public health, safety, welfare, or to encourage development or redevelopment. As you're all aware, this property has been the historic location of the hospital as well as medical office buildings for decades. Although it's been zoned light industrial, there have never been any true industrial uses on the property. And the past approvals of medical uses have all been done through conditional use permits approved by the Planning Commission. If the property were to be rezoned to mixed use, it would change some of the underlying allowed uses for future redevelopment. So currently, you've got a mix of uses under light industrial. Some of those, in staff's opinion, may not be the most desirable in this location, including manufacturing, repair businesses, mini storage, warehousing, those types of things. Right along Summit Boulevard, adjacent to the middle school, and in this transition zone, those may or may not be the most desirable future land uses. The mixed use district does allow for a variety of commercial and residential uses. Kind of runs the gamut of single family up through multifamily, as well as a variety of personal services, retail, office, including medical office as permitted uses. The thing that's unique about mixed use district is it does have a standard that if a mixed use property to be a permitted use must have a mixture, thus mixed use district, of residential and commercial uses. So that minimum threshold is a minimum of 20% of either residential or commercial. The property as it sits today includes both the old medical building as well as the new medical office building. So that would meet the criteria to get to a 20% threshold for a commercial mix with the likelihood of residential coming in the future to meet that 20% threshold. Now, the Planning Commission does have the discretion in the mixed use district to waiver from that 20%. So with a conditional use, Planning Commission can authorize a 100% commercial project or in theory a 100% residential project. And we do have some of those scattered around town. But the likelihood is that this would, if rezoned, probably would be a mixture of residential and commercial uses. The other criteria in the staff report that we outlined for you was that the rezoning is necessary to conform to the master plan. The word necessary may be a little bit strong, but I think there are provisions in the community plan that do support such a rezoning. There is clearly one that is probably not supporting of the application. We highlighted that in your staff report as well. There is a goal or policy in the community plan to preserve and protect that light industrial district. We don't have a lot of industrial property in Frisco, and the majority of it is clustered around that north 10-mile drive neighborhood. But there are provisions in here that include, creating infill and redevelopment opportunities along Summit Boulevard and also facilitating workforce housing and future redevelopment on Summit Boulevard specifically. So there are a variety of provisions in the community plan that could be seen as supporting this application. We did send this out to the various referral agencies. None of them had comments on the rezoning itself. They will obviously have concerns or questions and comments once we get to a site plan application, but at least on face value, we heard no concerns. We routed them specifically to our Public Works Department and Sanitation District and Excel, just concerned about future capacity issues if there were any. As it comes to the zoning, they've expressed they have no concerns about this. So in your staff report, we've highlighted kind of two different motion options for you. So if the Planning Commission, after hearing from the applicant, hearing from the public, if you have additional information requests, you could make a motion for additional information. We just ask that you specify what that would be, and we can bring that back to you at your final public hearing. Or you can make preliminary findings and recommendations. And there's a motion outlined in your staff report at the end for making that type of motion. I did want to share my screen here with you just real quickly, just to highlight the location we're describing here. Can everybody see that zoning map? Okay, so this is just off the Town of Frisco website. So you'll see kind of here at the upper right, you'll see the middle school property, and then you'll see School Road and Summit Boulevard. So the subject property used to be 3 lots. It's now 1 combined lot, but it's this green property right here. So as everybody knows, this is on Summit Boulevard, and it's a bit of a transition zone. You've got more of the regional commercial type uses and the gateway uses up here closer to the interstate, and you've got Main Street to the south. We've also got residential uses, including unincorporated Summit County properties that are mostly single family here to the west, as well as Public Works shop, and then transitioning into the middle school. So it's a bit of a unique property in terms of location, and obviously the marina here as well. I did want to highlight that we do have quite a bit of mixed use zone property along Summit Boulevard. So here's the existing medical center. It's up here to the northeast. This is all single family residential with an underlying zoning to mixed use. And then you also get up into the Crossroads development as well, where the veterinarian offices and Starbucks, those are also mixed use properties. And then we also have quite a bit of mixed use property to the south as well. We've got mixed use with the PUD overlay here. This is the Feral Gas site. What's currently parking for the marina, but properties owned by the Town of Frisco and the Frisco Sanitation District. We've also got this property here on the corner of Granite and Summit Boulevard that we've seen multiple mixed use proposals for over the years, and then kind of transitioning into more residential use, but again, still some of that mixed use district. So I did want to just highlight that for kind of orientation and discussion, just to kind of highlight some of those other mixed use properties. So as I said, we have 2 recommended motions in your staff report, and we're looking for some feedback from the Planning Commission. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Bill. We'll open it up to questions for staff. Robert, any questions for Bill?
Just one question. They've combined all of this into one single property, right? if we were to approve this, and is there any possibility that Centura could at some point redivide that property and then do something with the front of that property, like sell it to the highest bidder?
In theory, I guess they could do that today. I think there may be some challenges with that in that when they designed the medical office building, some of that was intentionally designed for shared parking access and some shared landscape buffers and things like that. So I would say kind of theoretically, from a developer's perspective, sometimes there's an advantage to subdividing and sometimes there's not. If you look at it from a zoning perspective, as soon as you subdivide a lot, you have now created setbacks within the center of your property that didn't exist previously. So sometimes that is a strong disincentive for developers, and sometimes they just want to sell the property. The other option that a property such as this could potentially be developed as is we could see a commercial pad or a residential pad. We see that in quite a few developments. If you look at like Base Camp, for example, that's all one large lot, but you have commercial pads for the individual buildings. We also see that in residential development as well, where you have standalone townhomes types of things. So you could still maintain a singular property for zoning purposes, and then internally subdivide that for ownership purposes, whether that be condominiums, townhomes, commercial pads, those types of things. So there's a lot of different options for developers, and that's under the current LI district as well as a future MU district. I don't think the rezoning would alter that one way or the other.
Okay, it's just, for me, it's just looking at the worst case possibility that could happen to this property, since we can't get any assurance of what's actually going to happen there other than sort of the presupposed. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Donna, any questions for staff?
So in the letter that was in the packet, in the first and the second paragraph, it says about housing crisis, especially in Frisco, where rentals are scarce and very expensive. So my question kind of piggybacks on with what Robert just said, in that if we are only considering light industrial to mixed use, and this letter is sort of dangling that it will be a rental apartment complex of some sort, is there anything that we can do to address that, to ensure that it actually will be, based on their letter, rental apartments?
I guess I would approach that from two different perspectives here. One would be with zoning, you never have any full guarantees of what you're going to get in the future, including under light industrial today. Like I said, it could be a medical office building, it could be a tire shop, it could be mini storage, it could be a whole variety of things based on the allowed land uses. Obviously, it's going to have to meet the zoning and development standards, similar with mixed use. If it were to be rezoned to the mixed use district, there's no guarantee it would be residential or workforce housing or a specific type of workforce housing in the future. The applicant has stated that that's their future intent, but just a straight rezoning does not guarantee that. And I think I would be reluctant to recommend the Planning Commission approve this if that was the only rationale for the rezoning. If this rezoning was solely contingent upon a workforce housing project, I think we would have to be very careful about crafting those types of conditions, and there would have to be a very direct nexus to the community plan to make anything like that, such as a housing requirement, a condition of approval. I think those can be a little bit difficult to do. I think from staff's perspective, big picture, this property is probably more appropriately zoned as mixed use than light industrial, given its history, given its current use, and given its desired future use. I think from a staff perspective, we think the rezoning stands on its own merits generically as going from light industrial to mixed use. Does that help answer your
Yeah,
question?
no, I agree. And therefore, if and when a project does come in front of us, then we would have the opportunity to not agree with it.
It would be reviewed as any other site plan application would. So if there is future redevelopment on this property, whether it stays light industrial district or whether it gets rezoned to mixed use, that specific development project is going to have to stand again on its own merits and demonstrate compliance with the town code. Under today's code, as the commission is aware, the zoning regulations don't jump into ownership for locals or second homeowners or rental versus for sale or any of those types of issues, with the one exception of the density bonus. But even that doesn't get into whether it's a rental or a for sale at the end of the day. There still are flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Ira, any questions for staff?
Bill, that was pretty complete. I think I crossed off almost all my questions. I think you said something about percentage of use. Did you say that 20% of the entire property needs to be commercial? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so the mixed use district, for something to be a permitted land use, there has to be a mix. And so that mix minimum is 20%, and that's 20% of either commercial or 20% of residential. So you could have a project in theory that's a 50-50 split, a 60-40 split, but it can't be any less than an 80-20, one direction or the other. The exception to that is the Planning Commission does have the discretion to deviate from that 20%. So theoretically, the Planning Commission could approve a project that's 100% commercial. The Planning Commission could approve something that's 100% residential, but only through that conditional use process.
So the medical building that's newly built, that's 100% commercial, is that right? I mean, the building.
It is.
And how do you determine the percentage? A percentage of what? Of the land use or the amount of finished space?
It's based on floor area.
Floor area, right, okay. So then technically, like you say, like the building to be built or the buildings to be built could be 100% residential. Yeah.
They could, because this is all one lot.
Right.
So that mix would be looked at in the context of the new medical office building that just opened up this summer, as well as any future redevelopment of that portion of the lot closer to Summit Boulevard.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Lena, any questions for staff?
Yeah, Bill, I have a couple. Well, to piggyback first on the initial set of questions that were thrown out there, I mean, I understand your statement about that there's no guarantees with zoning. Yeah, it can be anything. But the difference is that this is a rezoning, and they've come with a request for us to change our zoning and establish something different. And so that's why I feel like part of the argument that you're making in your staff report, I mean, under criteria number 2, the first sentence is the need for additional workforce housing continues to grow. And so you are tying your rationale to workforce housing as to how you're making this, meeting this criteria, which is really the only one that I feel this meets based on the rest of the paragraphs in that statement. So anyway, I just want to throw out there that while there are no guarantees with zoning, when we have a rezoning application, I think that's a little bit of a different animal. But I know we're on questions, so I wanted to ask, who picked mixed use as the zone district? Was that the applicant? Was that staff? How did you come up with that's the appropriate zone district for this rezoning?
I think that started with a conversation between staff in Centura a couple of years ago. They had approached the town stating that they wanted to do some workforce housing projects for their employees on this property. And staff identified that that would not be permitted in the light industrial district. That's not an option. So I think.
Okay, but I guess my question is, did you pick mixed use zone district for a particular reason? Was it the density? Was it just that it's both uses are allowed? Is it that mixed use is nearby?
I would say it's a combination of all those.
Okay,
It is a district that is nearby. It's common on Summit Boulevard and kind of these transition zones. It would facilitate some residential use. If something were to go more residential or less or more commercial at the end of the day, that's going to be at the Planning Commission's discretion as a conditional use. I think there was a conversation of, the historic use of this property, its current use, and in what district was generally more compatible in terms of its purpose statements and allowed uses for what's already there. And I think there was a conversation that light industrial, at least historically, has never been implemented on this property, even though that's been the zoning.
sure.
Again, this is somewhat of a transition zone. We were connecting kind of the Summit Boulevard commercial core in the main street, and this is kind of falling somewhere in between. You've got residential to the west, and you've got the middle school to the east. So we've got kind of this transitional corridor here, and there are other examples north and south of this property with that mixed use designation.
Okay, fair enough. So is there been any concern over quote unquote spot zoning? Because I mean, I know that there's mixed use around and nearby and across the street, but not directly adjacent to this property. And so this would be sort of a mixed use zoning alone right here.
I don't believe so. Our minimum threshold in the code is 1 acre, and this is 4 times that requirement.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Oh, wait, one more question.
Mhm.
You said something about a density bonus. Is that something that is allowed in this or part of the mixed use zone district?
It is. So there is a workforce housing incentive built into the mixed use zone district that, again, light industrial does not allow any residential development and certainly doesn't allow density bonus. So just looking at future residential projects, if one were to occur on this property, that workforce housing incentive would be available to a developer.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Lena. Patrick, any questions for staff?
Okay, one is about sustainability. And could you please clarify what, or confirm, I would suspect, that the current facility that just got completed and got their CO, that's not under the new Sustainability Code of Frisco, right?
That's correct. I believe that project got planning commission approvals back in 2018 and it opened this summer. So that would have predated the most current building codes and some sustainability codes.
And then I guess a follow on from that is I'm thinking about grandfather type issues, and well, because they had a property that was given building permission, given a CO, is currently operational, and in fact, they're sort of retroactively using the old facility for COVID testing. Does that mean anything in terms of whether they can operate under the previous sustainability code if we grant this zoning change, or they're susceptible to, or I guess compliant to the new code?
So just to clarify, the sustainability code is part of the adopted building codes.
Right.
So those would be a separate issue from zoning.
Gotcha.
So the land
whatever
use code,
application they put forward would be.
yeah. So any redevelopment or new development on this property or any other property in town would be subject to the new building codes.
Thank you.
There would be no type of grandfathering or anything like that under the old building codes.
Thanks, Bill.
Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Andy, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Bill, when we first saw this site, I think a few years ago, it was, they had to vacate one of those property lines, I think, as part of the medical center that came in. So there seems like there's a real possibility that it could end up getting subdivided again at some point. If we were to see a project come in here that, say, the new project is 100% residential, we've got 100% residential building and 100% medical building. If somebody were to come in and try to subdivide those lots, then basically they have two projects that are non-conforming without conditional use permits to be 100%. Is there, how would that process work if they wanted to try and subdivide this in the future and they would end up with two buildings that are 100% one way or the other? How could we ensure that we would have two projects that still meet the code?
I would say, generally speaking, anytime we get a replat application, we verify that it's not rendering the property non-conforming.
So they wouldn't be allowed to do that unless
Correct.
we could maybe grant a conditional use permit and say it would be okay, and then they could subdivide it, but they would have to come and apply for those conditional use permits to go 100% one way or the other?
That's correct.
Okay.
The other thing to keep in mind too is, I mean, they could still do subdivision for the purpose of property ownership. So for example, a condominium building. A condominium building is built on a singular lot, but you could have multiple property owners. So you are subdividing in the context of ownership, but you are not subdividing in the context of your zoning and development parameters.
Okay.
So this currently is one lot for zoning purposes. If the applicant, just talking theoretically, if the applicant's goal is to build housing on this project, on this property, I suspect it would be advantageous for them to maintain it as one lot. If they were to split the property and redevelop the portion closest to Summit Boulevard, that would be required to have a commercial component to it to meet that, because now you'd have a 20% threshold on two different lots.
But that's only if they subdivided before they built. If they build 100% residential and then subdivide, then we've got two non-conforming buildings that we'd have to deal with at that time when they try to subdivide.
Right. And like I said, we typically do not approve subdivision plats that render properties non-conforming.
Okay.
So
And then
we need to address that.
my other question is, assuming for now that this were going to be 100% residential, and I know we can't see an application to that effect yet, but do you have any calculations on how many residential units we'd be talking about when we look at acreage and square footage left on this lot to develop? How many units are we talking about? Because in my mind, having been on School Road, dropping off kids and picking them up, traffic's a big concern of mine for that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is going to pump a lot more cars through that intersection and probably pretty close to the light where, you know, that road gets backed up a lot at peak times when the middle school is functioning. Do we have a sense of how many units would fit? And then could we, as part of this application, require a traffic study that shows us whether or not that intersection is capable of handling the new residential units?
Let me grab the code section here real quick. I want to say mixed use is either 16 or 12. It's actually 14. So 3.8 acres times 14 units per acre would give you 53 units plus a density bonus. Now that would be maximum zoning allowance.
Hard to draw, hard to design.
Right. So again, that's just a theoretical number.
Right.
With any redevelopment of this property, whether it becomes a warehouse under light industrial district or whether it becomes workforce housing under mixed use, it's going to require a traffic study. We've already communicated that to the applicant. This is along a state highway. The access permits were reviewed with the medical office building itself. So a traffic study is going to be required for any future redevelopment on this property.
So we wouldn't be able to see any sort of preliminary study on the traffic impacts of this project prior to approving this zoning change?
I would say probably none that have a great deal of value. I guess you could ask for one that said, you know, if this property was an ultimate build out of 54 units plus the building, what would that look like? But that's just being speculative. I don't know what their intended build out would be. Again, density bonus is an option in this district, so that could raise the number higher.
But at that time, they'd have to prove to us that the traffic would work.
And again, we're looking at just one of the allowed uses. You know, if this were some industrial manufacturing plant, that may generate more traffic because of jobs and need for the thing. So again, it'd be somewhat of a speculative traffic report at the rezoning level.
Right.
I don't know
Okay,
if
I guess that's, we'll kick that can down the street a little bit. That's all I've got for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. My questions for the most part have been answered. Has this applicant by any chance pulled a permit for demoing that building that's existing?
That I don't know. I believe Centura had worked out an agreement with the developer of the medical office building, which is a separate entity than traditional neighborhood builders. I don't know if they've pulled that permit. They had talked about it earlier in the year, then that property got repurposed for the COVID testing site. So I think they've held off on that for now. And Susan, you'll jump in if you've got more background.
No permit has been issued for the demo. They talked a lot about it, but they didn't actually apply for the permit.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions. And Donna?
You know, what Andy was saying about potential traffic, how would, if the new building that's there, medical building that's there, and which had to, and I'm trying to remember when that came in front of us, and that had a traffic study as part of the application. But now, if this is going to be considered one whole lot with commercial and potential mixed use residential, how will that affect the traffic study? Because now they're sort of both combined because they're all considered on one lot.
I believe the original traffic study contemplated the existing building as well as the new building.
Okay.
So again, with any site plan application of this magnitude, the town code is going to require a new traffic study based on whatever the developer is proposing. So regardless of what it is that could go here in the future, it will be required a traffic study, and they will have to address those issues, including anything requirements of CDOT. As we've seen on a few other projects, that may include making alterations to the roadway, creating turning lanes, or changing light signals, a variety of things, but it's all going to be typically development specific. But that will be a requirement for anything that happens here, regardless of if it's light industrial zoning or mixed use zoning.
Right, thank you.
Ira.
I got a little confused on one thing. Andy was asking about potential yield of how many units, and you pulled out the zoning book and you multiplied the acreage by whatever, 14 or 13.2. So my question goes to that. It's already, so much of the property is already used. So are they entitled to 3-point-something acres of yield, even though half of it is this medical building?
They would be, because the zoning parameters would be based upon the entirety of the whole property as a singular lot.
That just doesn't seem mathematically correct. I just don't, I mean, the zoning, I thought would apply to a vacant lot, that you would get 13.2, whatever, 14 units
14.
per acre on vacant land. But this is not vacant land. So if we are speaking the same tongue, I disagree with that whole interpretation.
This is one lot. It's a singular lot with one building on it today. And people have the ability to build multiple structures on a singular lot. So the zoning parameters for density are based on the acreage, the buildable acreage, which means it excludes floodplain and wetlands and a variety of other things. But the buildable acreage of any lot, whether it's redevelopment or greenfield development of new construction, the zoning parameter.
But it's not vacant land anymore. It's largely developed. So, I mean, I just see it as like, well, you kind of put this building here, so you only have 2 acres left to go into the zoning calculation for yield. And that's kind of where I'm hung up, but maybe I'm the only one.
Yeah, and just because something's allowed by zoning as a maximum doesn't mean it's achievable or feasible or desirable for an applicant.
Okay.
Certainly something we can discuss further in our comments and kind of talk it out. Any other questions for staff at this time? I'm seeing none. At this time, we'll open it up to the applicant, Traditional Neighborhood Developers LLC, to give their presentation.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Melissa.
Hello. Great to see you guys.
Good to see you as well.
And great questions. Oh my gosh. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Melissa Sherburne, and it's great to be here with you tonight. I served on this planning commission for 7 years with many of you, so it's just so good to see you. And now I am on town council. However, tonight, it's my pleasure to represent Centura Health as the planner on this application for the zoning map amendment. I'm also joined by Ronnie Pelucio on my team, as well as the Centura leadership team, who I will introduce in just a moment. But before I do that, like I said, great questions. I wanted to just applaud Bill. I think that your staff report, Bill, was really outstanding. I don't have a whole lot to add on that. You've really spelled out how it meets the objectives of the community plan, the strategic goals of town council. It actually, in many ways, makes more sense as a mixed use district than the current designation as light industrial. I especially appreciate how you recognized that this is a gateway transitional area. And for years, every time I drive by there, I used to go to the gym when it was open. This property really impacts our downtown. Every visitor, every resident that drives towards the marina, towards Main Street, drives right past this. So in my mind, this is a really critical gateway parcel. And so I appreciated that being identified in the staff report. I also just wanted to emphasize the housing portion. And while I think Bill did a great job, that this really stands on its own 2 feet, its own merits, the intention here is in the background housing. And so this is a really, really unique opportunity. I think in the 7 years that I was on the planning commission, I don't know that I saw one rezoning application like this, especially one that would have such an impact on housing. You all know we talk about this ad nauseum in our community. And so this is a really unique scenario that this zone map amendment is really the first step in initiating a potential housing project. So that's very significant. Also, I wanted to point out, many of you may have seen last week, there was an article, and I mention it because I saw that it was the most read article in the Summit Daily. It was actually published in the Colorado Sun first. And basically it was just highlighting the volume of injured skiers and snowboarders that visit our emergency rooms every weekend during ski season. And in a moment, you're going to hear from the leadership team of Centura on the front lines, what they experience. But that article pointed out that up to 55, on average, every weekend, up to 55 injured skiers and snowboarders visit emergency rooms in the high country, not just Summit County, but in all mountain communities. We're obviously at the epicenter of that. And that's data without even COVID. And so it just really hits home. I think that these professionals in the medical field are the definition of essential. And what we're seeing, and actually the data is evident in the most recent Summit County housing assessment, that there has been a very steady increase in healthcare jobs in the county and need for healthcare workers, but housing simply hasn't kept pace. And so you can see that gap in right there in black and white in the housing assessment. And this is, really exemplifies that. So Centura is taking a tremendous initiative here to implement housing. As Bill pointed out, they've been talking about this for years. Our team has been talking with them for the last 6 months or so. And like I said before, this application is really the first step in doing so. So with that, I would like to introduce Lee Boyles, CEO of Centura, Cindy Farnsworth, the Human Resources Director, and Emily Ebert, the Finance Director. They're all here, been on this meeting, and I think a couple of them would like to say a few words, and we'd also, we're available for questions if you have them for us too. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
I guess I can start. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Well, thank you, Melissa, and thanks for everyone for having us tonight. And I really appreciate the questions, like Melissa said as well too. And I think I speak for Cindy and Emily and our whole team. Housing is something that's totally new to us. I mean, it's pretty easy for us to put up a medical office building or hospitals within the Centura system, but this is really new to all of us. So we feel very fortunate to have the partner that we have with Traditional Neighborhood Developers. And I've been at Summit now a little over 2 years, and there really isn't a conversation that goes by that doesn't have housing included in it. It's probably one of the biggest barriers that we have to fulfilling our mission in the community. We continually, especially every season, struggle with finding housing for our seasonal workers. So we're really no different than the resorts or other businesses that ramp up for the season. And we navigate that as best we can. And Cindy will share some specific statistics similar to like what Melissa shared with you. But really, our whole goal is to have some workforce housing, and to not only workforce housing, but to have it be as affordable as we possibly can. And we want to leverage that asset that we have in the land there, not only for us at Centura and St. Anthony Summit, but we know, so say if this property was maxed out and everything what we could put on there was put on there, we know we're not going to be using 100% of those units. And that's where we really feel it aligns with our mission of, if we can create affordable housing, not only for us, but for other essential workers, it is right next to the school, looking at housing and things like that for our other essential workers, for EMS and first responders and those type of folks that struggle with housing as well too. So we really want to leverage this asset we have in the land, not only for us, but for the community. This has gone back, even predates my time. We did our due diligence and brought in a housing consultant just to really look at what affordable housing looks like, but also to compare what rent is here to the metro. So this has 100% backing of our Centura Health System out of Denver, as well as our local community board. So we've discussed this quite a bit of what we can do. And there's been some strategic steps that we've had to complete before we get to this point of housing. The new panorama building that was put up next to it on this property, that allowed for our workforce that was in the old hospital building to occupy the second story of that building. And I heard the comment on demolition. We were really ready to pull the trigger last fall, but we knew we had to do what was right for the community and really continue some robust COVID testing out of that location, which we felt really probably wouldn't delay this project, but we felt that's what was needed at that time. And now we have one of the busiest testing sites in the state off of that property. So really our whole goal has been housing all along with this location. And it really is, we are never at a shortage of interested applicants for positions, whether it's nursing or critical care techs or folks to staff our clinics. But so many of them that once they come up here and they start exploring the cost of living, we do lose a lot of applicants, probably no different from any other business in the community. So it's finally kind of at a point where we're ready to look at this property. We're ready to develop it, and we look at in our conversations with Traditional Neighborhood Developers as well, and with Melissa and her team, it's such a desirable location, we feel, for somebody to live and to be in a unit at that location. It's not only close to work, it's close to schools, it's close to downtown. The bus stop is right there, the marina, the trail. So it's such a desirable neighborhood to develop, and that's really our ultimate goal. And
Hayden, it looks like we're not hearing you. Did you mute yourself? We can't hear you. Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Was I cutting out there? I apologize.
Yeah. We missed about the last minute or so.
to sum it up, we need housing. It's been a goal of ours, and we're now at a point where we can really develop that location. Just all the things have fallen in place. So I'll let Cindy go, because I know sometimes I have a bad connection where I'm at.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. My name is Cindy Farnsworth. I'm the HR director at St. Anthony Summit Medical Center. As Lee mentioned, he's been here just over 2 years. I'm encroaching my 3rd year here at St. Anthony Summit Medical Center. And Emily, our finance director, is just at her 2-year milestone as well. So for Summit County, that's a very small number. So I just want to share with you all that we also represent many associates that have been here in Summit County for 20, 25, 30 years as well. And I want to just share with you a little bit of data and answer any questions that you may have. So over the last 3 years, we have had at least 24 candidates go through the interviewing process, take time from our leadership to go through the interview process. And as you all know, the finances that go behind a recruiting process, it's not an inexpensive process in any manner. But we have had 24 candidates get to that final point and then decline the offers because they can't find reasonable housing in Summit County. Over the last 12 months, rolling calendar months, we've lost 50 associates because they've had to relocate. Our turnover is very high at St. Anthony Summit Medical Center. Our goal is to be under 17%, and we're about 12 points over that. So, excuse me, I'm sorry, we have 12 points to reduce that. We do a trimester, every trimester we do an engagement survey, and our comments primarily are focused around what can you do as leadership to help us with housing here. And those comments, we can look at those comments based on the tenure of the associate. It's impacting our longer term associates as well, especially with the ebbs and flow in our season. For example, our season, obviously we ramp up in November for our December, January, February, March timeframe. But if we're not able to find housing for those seasonal staff, then those longer term associates have to pick up additional shifts and cover that. So it impacts our long-term associates as well as our newer associates that are looking for employment. I also want to share with you just a little bit of a personal note here. My role is all about people in the human resources field, but I want to share with you my story and how I ended up at St. Anthony Summit. I worked with Dana Lavadier, who is the former HR director here, and she's at the town of Breckenridge right now, but she continued to talk with me about opportunities up here in Summit. And I did have an opportunity to meet the leadership team here and really felt that this is where I needed to be within Centura. I've been with Centura just about 5 years. And so with that being said, I commuted for the first 6 months over 72 miles a day from Littleton because I wasn't able to find housing up here that I could afford. And then finally, I was one of the lucky ones that ended up in a lottery with the town of Frisco, and I ended up in the Mary Ruth Housing Project. I am so blessed to have that opportunity where I have a place that my family can come up and visit me, and I can stay and be here and represent our associates late hours if need be, and not have to worry about driving back to a metro area. So I just wanted to share with you that not only are frontline workers, for example, our entry-level workers working 1 and 2 jobs just to be able to afford housing here, but so are our director levels. And we even have some of our higher level executives that live in some of the deed restricted areas. So we are looking at this property as a solve for our associates. We have heard the voices of our associates, and we want to be a part of the solution. This also fits in with our mission statement, and we want to make sure that we are providing services to not only our internal community, but to the community members within Frisco. So Lee, I'll turn it back over to you to just summarize that about our mission, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize, you guys. I have a terrible connection sometimes, but no, I think you summed it up really well, Cindy, and it's just the pieces have finally fallen in place for us to be at this point to really look at developing workforce housing that not only we as the hospital can use, but those other units with ebbs and flows of the season that other businesses and others in the community can use. And our Centura system is behind this 100%, as well as our local board. So I feel like we're in a really good position right now for this project.
Great, thank you. Is there any more presenters on this application?
Nope, that's it.
Great, thanks, Melissa. At this time, we'll open it up to questions. Robert, would you like to start?
Hey, Lee and Cindy, both of whom I know. And I know we can't ask you to define what it is we're actually trying to do, but what's the time frame for what you're looking to do? I mean, are we looking at seeing if we approve this, and are we looking at seeing an application that yet this year, or are we 2 or 3 years down the road?
No, Robert, our ideal situation is really to get through this winter, to plan for the development of this site over the next several months, and really move this project along as fast as we can. Like I said, we really do have the full support of our Centura system. It's on our strategic plan, as well as full support of our board. We would probably have been moving it along a little faster as well. But like I said, having to use that site for the COVID testing is really what we felt was necessary at the time. So our whole plan is really, we've identified a couple alternative testing sites that we're pursuing, and really to be able to get busy on this project as soon as we possibly can, following all the necessary steps through, planning commission and everything like that. And then really following Melissa and her team has really been just an unbelievable resource for us. Cause like I said, housing is new to us in healthcare. We know it's necessary, but we feel really fortunate.
You cut out again, Lee. Cut out.
Robert, this is Cindy. Was he able to answer your question there, as far as we would like to move this forward fairly quickly? And my goal is the sooner the better, as well as I think he was sharing that we have the support of Enterprise, our Centura Enterprise system as well.
Yep. No, he did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna, any questions for the applicant?
No questions.
Ira?
No, I see, I like the application because it looks to me that the only way to get to housing on that site is to go through the zoning change. So that sounds good to me. So I like the application. To some extent, I have to feel that we have to look at good faith as to what kind of units they put up, whether they're rental, for sale. I think all that remains to be seen, and those choices are in the hands of the owners and developers. So in order to get to step one, I like the idea of being able to get residential there to work towards our housing crisis.
Thank you, Ira. Lena, any questions?
Yeah, hi, thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. Is that me? Sorry, I was hearing some feedback. I have 2 questions. You talk about this being a desirable neighborhood for people to live with, and I don't disagree with you, but I do wonder about the proximity to Highway 9. Are you guys at all concerned about putting a bunch of housing right next to the highway and then there being just excessive highway noise? Or I guess I'm mostly just curious.
Well, I can answer that. I think it's a great thing to consider. If if you actually look at the map, and I'm sure you're familiar, Lena, there's residential on the other side that is also very close to Highway 9, and there's some buffering. But there's also a grade change and slight, but we would get into that in great detail in the development application. And so
Sure.
it's something to consider.
Yep, sure. And I was just curious if that was a thing, a factor, because I kind of wondered why we didn't put the medical office building close to the highway and then housing interior. But anyway, and then the other thing, sounds like you've been studying this issue for a bit and you're ready to break ground and move this forward. And I guess my question is, what is the type of housing that your employees need? And I'm wondering, are they big units? Are they rental apartments? I'm assuming you're trying to target a certain type of employee, or you have the most need in a certain sector. And I guess I just was wondering if you could specify that a little bit more based on the research that you've done.
Well, I will say that as part of let me just say this, and then I'll turn it over to Lee or Cindy. We are doing employee outreach as part of the development process to really craft a proposal that makes the most sense, not only from a land use perspective, development perspective, but also to meet their needs and also appeal to the greater community and potential partners. So that's also forthcoming as part of ultimately a development proposal. But would you add anything, Cindy or Lee?
Okay, and because there was some mention of seasonal, that there's some seasonal housing need. And that to me is different than what would, I guess, townhomes versus apartment buildings versus everything else in the middle. So I was just curious if you knew that, what kind of housing you're targeting for the site. But I
stay tuned, Lena.
Stay tuned. Okay. I'm staying tuned. I'm muting.
Okay.
Thank you, Lena. Patrick, any questions for the applicant?
I don't have any questions now. I have a lot of comments, but I'll. Thanks.
Great. Andy?
No comments, Kelsey, thanks.
Great.
No questions.
We'll close the question section and open it up to public comment. Please state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if you want to indicate by raising your hand or unmuting yourself. I'm seeing no public comment at this time for this agenda item. So we will close the public comment portion of this meeting and get into commissioner comments. All right, Robert, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Melissa, for a great presentation. Cindy, Lee, and Emily for being here. I'm really supportive of the idea of putting workforce housing on this site. I think there's some problems that we're going to have to face, and including noise from Highway 9, safety at Highway 9. But I think if we see as good a design for something that you're going to put on this property as we saw in the Panorama building, and you work with us in the same way as you did for that, I can't imagine that we won't have a really great project that will benefit the community as well as St. Anthony's, which is critical to this community. And I do worry about traffic at this site, but it'll be interesting to see how the traffic engineers work that out and find a way around some of that. But in general, I'm supportive, and I'm really happy with what I've heard here today. Certainly, I would certainly like something better here than a tire shop on that corner. So, so I think that moving to mixed use is far better than light industrial.
Thank you, Robert. Donna, would you like to?
I appreciate that Centura cares about their employees. And if this project does come to fruition with rentals, it would be just a win for everybody. So we're excited to see what the next step is. And thank you for offering to develop something on that site to address housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Any additional comments, Ira?
No, I'm waiting for the details, but at this point, very happy.
Great, thank you. Lena?
Well, I guess I want to have the commissioners sort of think about this not as a housing thing, because I understand that the applicant is here and the intent is to build workforce housing, but it could be many number of different combinations of housing. And I think we need to talk about this rezoning on the rest of the rationale, which is, does it stand on its own merit? Does it make sense? Because the comprehensive plan talks about, we don't want to lose light industrial land. But I agree with Bill and with Melissa on why this does have its own merits, in that it is a transition zone. There is mixed use around it and throughout, well, nearby. It's not that far of a stretch. The current zoning doesn't really apply that well to that medical office building. And so I guess I just want us to even though we're talking about housing and all the housing needs, just to think about it that way too, whether the rezoning makes sense despite the housing part of it. So, and I guess I just want to say, I think it does. I think Bill is right in his staff report that it does make sense. But the housing thing is not a guarantee, right? And it might not even, we have to accept that it might not be workforce housing, even if that's what we want to see there. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Lena. I think that's an excellent point. Patrick?
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying, in my the last 15 years of my career, I've spent a lot of time doing major healthcare projects in various places. It doesn't matter. I've never come across one that's zoned LI, light industrial. So I'm just going to start for my fellow commissioners and for Frisco and say that the zoning is wrong. It just sort of happened that way. So something needs to change probably. So then you ask yourself, what's next? Well, everyone that I've seen is usually commercial if it's of a certain scale. And if it's small storefront, clinic type operations, then it ends up being mixed use. So I believe that there is something that needs to change here. And then the next comment, the reason that I joined the Planning Commission is because I care deeply about the major access corridors to our community. I care about anchor streets. And this is part and parcel to all of those things. I've been lucky to be part of a couple of focus groups from the town that talked about, what are we going to do with Highway 9? What are we going to do with Main Street? What are we going to do with various intersections? And I think that if we move towards more of a mixed use situation closer to the road, to me, there's some legitimacy to breaking down scale and allowing variability. I will say that my above comments or previous comments come with a lot of caveats. I care deeply about this particular corner. It's one of the most important things that is likely to happen in the next 10 years down that corridor that's part of Frisco, given that I'm pretty sure Walmart's not going anywhere and Safeway is not going anywhere. So when you think about sort of applicable parcels that might change, this one has been, and honestly, in my a previous career, I was looking at this one with some people as business development opportunity. It's been there for a while. It's ready to go. So I appreciate that Centura is looking at this as making it a holistic complex, but it has to be done right. So I guess, just to circle back, I believe that the zoning needs a change. It's not right being light industrial, and I support moving it to mixed use. However, I'm going to be extremely watchful and careful in my personal view of what comes next. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Andy.
Yeah, I'm also supportive of this project. I really want to thank you guys for kind of thinking outside the box and not just, thinking, well, it is what it is, but finding a good solution and a good pathway to get us more housing and also to redevelop this parcel. I think we've all been staring at that blue roof for a while, and wouldn't mind seeing something else there. I think I definitely am going to be concerned with traffic. I'm curious to see how we get through that. But, as far as to kind of piggyback on your point, Lena, I think we do have to be ready for this to not be residential. But when I look at the permitted uses in light industrial versus the permitted uses in mixed use, I feel like the mixed uses are much more appropriate for this site. So whether we get residential or we get a different mixed use project, I still think we're heading in the right direction with this parcel by changing its zoning. Like Robert said, I don't want to see a tire shop there. So I think whatever we get out of the mixed use zoning is going to be an improvement over the light industrial on this particular lot. So I'm in favor of it, and I really thank you guys for finding this solution. I think it's a very creative solution for a lot of different people, for Centura and for the town of Frisco. So appreciate your efforts on that. I don't have any further comments. I support the project.
Thank you, Andy. And I want to thank Melissa and Lee and Cindy and Emily. That was a very thorough, well thought out presentation. And I truly believe that the new building there is absolutely beautiful. And I wish it was even in a more predominant spot. And I would love to see the blue roof gone. I mean, it makes me a little reminiscent of my childhood, but it is an underutilized site. I think it's such a fragile situation that we're looking at that, I know you guys are very capable individuals. I love the creativity. I love, for example, Base Camp, when we're looking at the same players who are involved on this parcel. That's a much bigger lot, but the impacts from what has happened there on Lusher Court and Summit Boulevard, it's a terrible intersection. And this is a terrible intersection too. And that is where we're funneling our children in and out of school, people recreating back there. It needs to be addressed in an overall concept that we have to collaborate with CDOT, with the town, with how it gets developed, and make sure that we don't exasperate the problem that already exists. At first, I have to admit, I came in being like, no, that intersection is just too big of a nightmare. I would love to see more housing, and that is a critical thing that we need in Frisco and Summit County as a whole. And I think we do have to operate in faith, but after listening to the presentation and my fellow commissioners, I do agree that this is a very exciting, creative way to produce, kind of that entrance into Main Street, and that there is compatible mixed use across the street. I don't feel like it is a sore thumb, but I do believe that we need to be very, very careful with the traffic study, what we approve, work as a community on this project, because it is an incredibly important parcel, and there's a lot of moving elements and a lot of unknowns, but I'm in favor of it, and I thank you all for your time and commitment to it. Are there any other comments, Robert?
Do you want a motion?
Yes.
I'm with respect to file number RZ-20-0182, I move the Planning Commission adopt the recommended preliminary findings set forth in the Planning Commission staff report dated January 7, 2021, and that based on those preliminary findings, the Planning Commission preliminarily recommends approval of the rezoning application to change the zoning classification of 18 and 68 School Road, Lot 1, St. Anthony Summit Medical Campus from Light Industrial District to Mixed Use M District.
Second.
Cheryl, would you take a vote?
Commissioner Scupian,
Yes.
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesmes,
Yes.
Commissioner Franken,
Yes.
Commissioner Tane,
yes,
Commissioner Withrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to collaborating with you all in the future.
Thank you. We will see you in a couple weeks.
Great. Do we need
Thank
to
you.
mention, Bill, that the second reading and hearing will be on January 21st?
It will. We've sent out the public notice today in anticipation of some kind of action this evening. So the final public hearing will be at your next meeting.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Are there any updates from staff?
I don't know if Don wanted to jump in.
Don doesn't want to talk. I have a question about library lofts. They pulled out of the MLS, and I hear rumor that they're going back to the drawing board or expired, and now they're under the new code.
Well, with that project, all I will say is they do have an approved development application. They do have an active building permit application for a foundation only permit. They have not resubmitted anything different. So that is the current status. They haven't expired as of yet. I believe the expiration of the current permit is roughly January 20th off the top of my head. So until they do submit something or something else changes, they have a current development application.
And their conditional use is still?
It is still vested. Yes, it is still vested because they did obtain a building permit to move them forward. If that building permit is to expire, then the conditional use permit will also expire.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
No updates? Donna?
Yeah, I have a question. In regards to the parklets, and in that the original intent was for restaurants to be able to extend their outdoor seating. So my question is that number one, that they don't, most of the parklets are not shoveled. A couple of them are spotless. A couple of the restaurants like Fifth Avenue are spotless. If someone slips and falls on a parklet, whose liability is it?
That liability is part of the license agreement that they obtained or that they entered into when they obtained parklets and use of the right of way. They are required to have liability insurance that covers the town and names the town as insured. So it is the business's responsibility on those.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, it certainly is our intention that those parklets be used. Otherwise, they're taking up parking spaces. You might see that the ones that were in front of Uptown were removed right around Christmas time, as we noted that they had not been used. And so we are monitoring that. And if we do get reports of some that are not being used continually, then we certainly will reach out to the business owner.
Well, and I think it's great that Cindy from Uptown realized that they weren't being used, especially because she's on the shady side of the street, and that it freed up like 4 parking spaces. So just wondering, why does Kalisko and Flying Crane have them? Because all they have now and then is a folding table with bins of stuff in it, where that could fit per the code in their 3 feet on the sidewalk.
Well, so first of all, the 3 feet on the sidewalk, we try not to utilize during winter time because of snow plowing operation and snow removal for the sidewalks. We did not limit the parklets to restaurants only. We did open those up for all businesses if they had a use for those. we gave restaurants priority, and after all the restaurants had requested parklets, we opened it up for retail businesses as well. Callisco indicated that they would like to use those for outdoor displays, primarily on the weekends, but that's still met with the intent, so we are allowing them to do that. As long as they continue to be used, they'll be able to continue to use those.
Okay, it's just kind of silly, but that's okay.
I certainly appreciate that. The winter parklets has been an experiment. We've been observing other communities that some have built roofs over the top to shed snow a little bit better, and there's a lot of new ideas going on with those. Ours are very basic. Going into it, we had an assumption and a belief that the parklets would be primarily utilized by businesses on the north side of the street up until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and lo and behold, that's pretty much what's happened. But again, we're giving everybody an opportunity. We'll see if that changes now that we are moving back to where we're allowed to have some indoor occupancy in restaurants again.
But I think they are being utilized. I mean, we eat out way too much, and so, but but you know, we've had dinner in a parklet at 6 o'clock, and it's chilly, but you just dress appropriately in it, and I think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can I just chime in on that? Because I feel like they're always not being used, at least when I walk by, or they're less used than they are used. And so what is the benefit of that? If they're not being used, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge there, and again, it is a balance. We are trying everything that we can to give businesses an opportunity to have some opportunities to have customers, especially when there was no occupancy allowed indoors at all. We may see that some restaurants say, you know what, we don't really need it anymore now that we're allowed to have 25% occupancy and the town can remove them. At the same time, if it ends up that we're getting some après ski customers on Saturday and Sunday only at 2 in the afternoon, and that's the only time they're being used, it might be that the parking spaces are not being missed either, because there's just not that many people out on town. So rather than trying to move parklets in and out, it may be better to just go ahead and have them out there and have that opportunity for the businesses when the need arises.
Okay.
I would only comment that as somebody who lives right on Main Street and walks up and down Main Street a lot because I'm retired also, they get used more than you think. Not in huge ways, but whether it's the log cabin, a family takes takeout food and sits out there and eats their takeout food, or whether it's the roasters, or I see a lot of people in the parklets, not every day, but more than some might think.
Great. Any other questions or comments? If not, just a real brief update. I'm sure many of you may know that we put out an RFP for the property at 619 Granite, also known as the CDOT lot. This is a joint project that we're working on with the Colorado Department of Transportation. We received a number of proposals for that. We're currently conducting interviews with selected teams, and we're hoping to award a design contract for that property as early as January 26th council meeting. So it's kind of an exciting time. It's very busy as a result, but we are certainly moving forward with that.
Yay.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I don't have any. Oh, Ira?
Yeah, are there rules or percentages of that CDOT lot, how much it needs to be occupied by CDOT employees? I mean, is that part of the agreements?
So at this point in time, we have an agreement with CDOT to jointly develop the property, or clarify that. We have an agreement to get to 80% construction drawings for the property. And as we do that and we get cost estimates, we'll work through final agreements on how we're going to ultimately develop and operate and manage. Right now, the idea is that however many units are created, it'd be essentially split half and half. Half for CDOT employees, primarily in their a lot of their maintenance employees, and then the other half for people that live and work in the 10-mile basin, which is Frisco and Copper and the middle school and the hospital.
And would these be ownership units?
The way the RFP was put out as a rental project, shooting for the
Okay.
100% AMI range. That is, I think, the need that has not been met most in the 10-mile basin.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anything else? If not, everybody remember to be extra kind. It's tough times out there. And thank you all.
Thank you.
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Yeah, second, yes.
All right. Be well, everyone.
Good night.
Happy New
Good
Year.
night.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.